2024 Centralina Executive Board meeting agenda. So we'll move on to items 1 and 2 on the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes 2 items today, including 1, which is the approval of the March 13th, 2024 Executive Board meeting minutes, and 2, it's an amendment to the fiscal year 23-24 budget. Information on both items are in your packets. Are there any comments on the consent agenda?
I'll make my own motion to approve.
I'll take my second.
All right, you got a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving right along, down to item 3, Centralina Spotlight, Planning Department, Regional Coordination and Training. This year, we continue to spotlight one of Centralina's programs at the start of each of our executive board meetings. This is a great opportunity to continue to build our knowledge of what Centralina does and how its programs, services, and activities support our local governments and our constituents. Today, the focus is on our Planning Department's Regional Coordination and Training Program. After this short video, Jason Wager, Director of Planning, will answer any questions or concerns you may have.
This month, our spotlight is on Centralina Regional Planning Services, specifically professional development and customized training. This work supports our effort to build local government capacity, efficiency, and innovation in service to Centralina communities and the region. The Centralina Regional Planning Department is committed to shaping sustainable and inclusive communities through deliberate engagement and regional collaboration with local stakeholders. Our mission is to foster intentional growth strategies, expand mobility options, and maintain the character of our communities. To help build local government capacity, we offer a robust set of trainings and educational opportunities, which we will go over in detail in today's video. Centralina's regional planning team provides trainings for elected officials, planning boards, boards of adjustments, and other boards. These trainings cover a broad range of topics, from basic planning and zoning concepts to public meeting skills and best practices. Since 2020, we have conducted trainings or are contracted to conduct trainings for a variety of large and small member communities, pictured on the map on your screen. Centralina Learns is an educational series created to provide professional development opportunities for local government staff, elected officials, managers, and professional planners. These classes, offered both in person and virtually, cover topics that support our region's communities and improve the overall health, vibrancy, and resilience of the Greater Charlotte region. Each year, about half the topics are devoted specifically to planning topics, with credits provided for those who attend. Examples of topics from this year's programming are included on your screen. Centralina has also developed several educational sessions and training opportunities customized based on community or agency needs. The Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization hired Centralina to develop a 4-part training series on linking transit and land use at the community scale. Each session features presentations from planners and technical experts that introduce the link between land use and transportation planning, provide ways to create mobility-friendly places, how to plan for multi-modal transportation, and more. Model ordinance language on integrating transit and land use is being developed by Centralina as a supplement to these educational sessions. Centralina Regional Planning also assists with geographic information systems, otherwise known as GIS. One recent project the team assisted with is a GIS mentoring program formed in partnership with the National Renewable Energies Laboratory and Centralina Clean Fuels Coalition. The program was developed to provide GIS training to clean fuels coalitions across the country through 4 stages: needs assessment through focus groups and surveys, basic training on GIS, a specialized 5-course training on skills and use cases, and one-on-one mentoring and support to help coalitions through program implementation. One last example of services Centralina Regional Planning provides includes the City of Salisbury, which received the Byrne Criminal Justice Innovation Grant to focus on community-led crime reduction. The city hired Centralina to develop an educational session on placemaking that could be delivered to members of the West End neighborhood, the planning area for the grant. The educational session also include engagement opportunities for attendees to learn how they can take advantage of community assets in order to improve the neighborhood's safety and ensure the well-being of residents and visitors to the community. If you'd like to learn more about services our Centralina Regional Planning team provides, that may be able to help your community, please reach out to Regional Planning Director Jason Wager.
Any questions for Jason? All right, well, thanks, Jason. So, moving right along to item 4, our federal relations update. I'll now call on Leslie Mazinga, strategic consultant, and share with the board an update on Centralina's federal government engagement activities. And present the February-March strategic consulting performance reporting. Yeah, Leslie.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you. On page 15, actually, I'm gonna start at the bottom and move to the top, if y'all don't mind. On page 15 is your performance report. And what you'll see there is some follow-up in terms of the meetings that we've been having, the communications we've been having with the congressional delegation, a little bit follow-up to Geraldine's visit in DC, as well as working through the appropriations language that we work on every year, as well as putting together congressional or community projects funding and things of that nature. So again, I don't ever like to read. Y'all get the report ahead of time. I don't want to take up your time going item by item, but I am happy to answer any questions about the report if folks have anything that they've seen that they'd like some additional information on. So I'll pause there before I go into federal activities. Anything there? Okay. So the other things that I wanted to update you on this evening, a couple of things. First of all, you've heard us talking about the fact that North Carolina's own Virginia Fox, who is chair of the Education and Workforce Committee. You'll notice they changed that. I've told y'all that before, a little inside the Beltway nugget. When one party's in charge, it's called Education and Labor. And when the other party's in charge, it's called Education and Workforce. So right now with Republicans in charge, it's called Education and the Workforce. In any case, Chairwoman Fox has a stronger workforce for America bill that is the WIOA reauthorization that passed on the House floor yesterday with strong bipartisan support. I think the vote was 368 to 26 or something like that. Don't quote me on those numbers, but you can get the idea. Very strong support, and it was passed under suspension of the rules. And what that means is that there's no amendments, no amendments offered or discussed. They basically have an up or down vote on the legislation as it is. It received strong bipartisan support in committee as well. So we weren't all that surprised that it went well on the floor, but we were a little bit surprised that they had no opportunities for additional amendments or things of that nature. So it moves on to the Senate at this point. We don't have Senate legislation that's comparable or at all. The chairman of that committee is Bernie Sanders. We expect that he will not take Congresswoman Fox's bill and just run it through committee, but will have his own legislation. And we've been working with the state COGS. Geraldine's very involved in that effort as well. We've been working with the state COGS on certain provisions that we're trying to get in to possibly the Senate legislation. Senator Ted Budd serves on that committee for us, and he has been very receptive to our ideas about the ways that WIOA could be slightly better. It's not that it's a bad bill, and we do want reauthorization, but there are things that we believe that could be tweaked. We've gotten some great information David has sent us from the State Workforce Board and all of those things that we're factoring into our communications with the committee. The other items that are getting a little bit of movement, but not anything that would be considered, in an expedited manner, the Older Americans Act, which of course is Linda's territory. She's the expert, so I'm not even going to try to explain all the different things that go on there. But that is up for reauthorization, and her organization has been very involved in things about that might need to be improved. I know folks are very concerned about flexibility that was allowed during COVID that's now going to go away without those special circumstances in place. A lot of that I'm sure will need to be addressed, but we really don't have legislation to dissect or to really, advocate for in large part right now. So we're monitoring that very quickly. And then the other item is the Economic Development Administration reauthorization is another piece that we're watching. Again, no real development. It has, it's come out of Senate committee, but it hasn't really moved on the House side. And as you can imagine, the further along that we get into this year, the closer we get to November and a presidential election, as well as the congressional races are very tight. We have very tight, margins in the Senate. We have extremely tight margins in the House, to the point that they're actually, with early retirements, they're starting to get closer and closer. And in fact, right now, where we only have, because of vacancies, we have 4 vacancies, there's only a 2-vote loss that Republicans can afford in order to keep a vote. And later on this month, it'll go down to, because of vacancies filling, in blue districts prior to red districts, the numbers are going to change for a while to where there literally is only a 1-vote difference that can be done. So that for the House is really, in the 30+ years that I've been in this business, I've never seen margins like that. In the Senate, sure, we've seen lots of 50-50 years with vice presidents breaking ties and things of that nature, but I've never seen a 1-vote margin in the House as long as I've been there. So that means that there's going to be a lot of stalemate. There's going to be a lot of fighting. Nobody's going to want anybody to get credit for anything because that affects presidential politics. But, then you see something like Virginia Fox's bill that gets through with strong bipartisan support, so it can be done. So we'll continue to monitor those other pieces and see if they can move them along. So that's kind of some just overview. They are home because it is an election year, for all congressional seats, and we have a lot of new seats in North Carolina. Keep in mind that everyone campaigning is home a lot more. So as you have projects you want to discuss, issues you want to discuss, it's a great opportunity to catch them here locally. And if you ever need any advice on who to call and how to set that up, any direction, part of our work is not just these larger issues, it's also at the grassroots level in terms of troubleshooting. So don't hesitate to call on us if there's a way that we can help direct you. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll pause there to see if anybody has any other questions for me in general about Washington. Okay, all right.
Actually, you had one comment from Mark Sue. Open seats in the House, what exactly is causing this year?
The open seats in terms of retirement?
Yeah.
Some folks have had various reasons. One gentleman, for example, took a job as a professor at a university. Maybe that was his dream job. I don't know. We saw, McCarthy step away. After Speaker Johnson was put in place, Speaker McCarthy, that's a vacancy that we still have. I think everybody knows the backstory there. So there's no one set reason. There's been some reports where folks, have left and they've publicly said, I've just had enough. I can't take it anymore. So there's been any number of reasons, but nothing that would be a consistent reason that I can see.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, if I might just do a follow-up to that.
Sure.
So I think it's interesting that Leslie would make that comment in her 30 years. This is the first time she's seen that. That speaks volumes, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. That really does speak a lot. Because you think about in 30 years, how many members of Congress in both House and Senate, and how many presidents we've had in 30 years. If that's the first time, that's interesting. Just a reminder for we peons here in the region in our 9 counties, remind me or remind us how many members of Congress in the House does our region touch starting in January?
Okay, so starting in January, and Martha, so you would catch me on a stat that I'm going to have to sit here and think about for a moment.
No, but I think we can do it collectively. I think, we know that, we know that whose ours are. I think there's 3 that our region touches.
She's saying 3? No, there's 5. Yeah,
There's 5? Okay.
Yeah, you've got 5. You've got 5 that it currently touches, 5 House members, and then the 2 senators, of course. What I'd have to double check, and I'm happy to do and get back and have it reflected in the minutes, if that's helpful, is I need to remember, because I'll tell y'all redistricting, I can't keep it all straight in my head every time it changes. I would want to double check and make sure that I have it correct, whether or not we lose any of those seats. Geraldine, I don't know if you remember from the reports either, but if not, I'd be happy to, like I said, to get it into the minutes, whether we stay the same, lose a seat, or pick up a seat from the region. I believe it stays basically the same, but of course, the basis will change. You have a new seat in the 6th district, which, is, right now, well, it would have been Kathy Manning, but the way that it's been redistricted, it's a heavy Republican seat, and now you've got, Addison McDowell, who will be that member because Mark Walker dropped out of that runoff in order to work on the Trump campaign. So we know we're picking up, that as part of it, because that will cover a lot of the Kannapolis, Cabarrus, and maybe parts of Concord. I'd have to be sure. We know Jeff Jackson and Dan Bishop, both who work in this, who represent this region, are running against each other, in the race for Attorney General. So, we've got a number of new faces that will be coming in, and of course, we'll be working to introduce Centralina and its priorities to those members, starting in January.
Thank you. But the only thing I'll say to that is the reason I mentioned that is that we as a region still carry a heck of a lot of weight in Congress. Our region, if we've got 5 members of the House, then we've got, if there's only 14 in North Carolina and 5 of them cover our parts of our region, that just speaks volumes. And I just would add to those folks that are on this call that do or do not know Addison McDowell. Addison worked for the North Carolina League of Municipalities for a short time before then he got into this campaign. And his mother is a Methodist minister who is in our county in Stanley County. So there's all kinds of interesting comments about how we know each other and folks know each other. So thank y'all for letting me make those little comments, because I think that we've got a lot of input, or have an opportunity for a lot of input.
I absolutely agree with that. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, okay. So, and it stays there. Okay, good. But
McHenry's leaving too.
yeah, and that's another good, yes, McHenry's seat will be new. Adams will be a constant. McHenry will be new. Jackson will be new. Bishop will be new. And really that's a lot of Addison's, district area. And,
Said 6.
and sorry,
I don't remember who you said it was.
well, 6 will be Addison
That will be
McDowell.
Addison, that's the
Yeah,
one.
yeah, I'm trying to think of who, I'm leaving somebody off and I can't think of who it is. Hudson doesn't have this area and I don't think he's coming back in. I'll get the list out. So, like I said, I get them confused myself trying to cover the whole state, but we do have, and I'll make sure that, I guess Geraldine, you can either go in the minutes, or if it's helpful to everybody to have on the federal page, a comparison between the seat that's held, because we have already done this, I just don't have it in front of me, but the seat that's currently held and where it will, we've got the maps here, but who are the people running for that particular office? Because it never hurts if you know these folks, and we know that they lean a certain way, then, going ahead and contacting them and talking up Centralina certainly doesn't hurt. But we will definitely be doing our part, post-election and particularly in January after they're sworn in, to make sure that we get into those offices early. As everybody knows, it sometimes does take some time to get staffed up. So, we wait and see, just like Larkin and Jeff Jackson's office, we ended up having a friend, we had a way to go there. So we'll be looking for those names, those common names, that we can count on to help us get those early introductions.
And in 14, Tim Moore being the Speaker of the House now, and most likely the Congress to be. That may be a plus for us too, already working with him.
That's
on
right.
State level.
That's right, that's right. And that is often a good indicator. Just in some of the other parts of the state, we had, I think y'all will recall that, all 4 of the new members in the last election all came from the North Carolina Senate. They were all former North Carolina senators. So goes to show that those are good stepping stones for anybody looking for a pathway to Congress.
All right, thanks.
Anything
Any
else?
questions?
Okay.
All right, well, can I get a motion to approve the strategic consulting performance report for February and March 2024?
So moved.
Second. Motion and second. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passed. Moving right along. That's exactly what we're doing. And item 5, it's advancing the plan. Committee update. So next on the agenda is advancing the plan committee update. I'd like to thank Mayor Hennick for his continued service as co-chair of this committee. Now I'll call Dave Waiter, Waiter, the planning director, to share the update.
Thank you very much. Thanks for a little bit of time tonight. You've heard, many of you have heard a bit about Connect Beyond and advancing the plan committee over the last year. So this is meant to be fairly quick and to just give you the latest. This was something that you've said we'd like those periodic updates. So a quick reminder, kicked off in 2023, had I believe it was 6 meetings throughout the year to advance that conversation about mobility. How do we fund it? The big governance questions and conversations that need to take place if we really want to look at expanding mobility options and investments in a major way. And that really involved some of the things you see listed here, the implementation activities that are already going on. So what are some of those early wins and that momentum, as well as some of the principles that we want to follow regardless of how this goes. And then that model for collaboration, what's going to work for everybody. Wanted to point out the latest roster for 2024. There were a couple of changes, including Commissioner Lisa Qualls from Mooresville, and she, in her role, she's representing the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization as their chair. Mayor Woody Washam from the town of Cornelius is the MTC. That's the Metropolitan Transit Commission, or CATS's policy board representative. And then Council Member Tommy Green with Boiling Springs. He's also the Gas and Cleveland Lincoln NPO vice chair. So a good representation across the region. You see it's not all elected officials. You've got some county managers, you've got a couple of economic development folks. So a good cross-section and perspectives. 2024, moving things ahead from where we were in 23, looking ahead, it became very clear that there needed to be a much more concerted and deeper dive approach as to how we achieve these things we want to do. And it's probably going to require legislation. It's probably going to require new legislation, so not amending existing. That wasn't arrived at lightly. That was a lot of discussion, a lot of inputs from the group. And you can see some of those goals here overall, and I'll dive into a couple more of the specifics. So first things first, so what were the guiding principles? What were just fundamentally as we proceed as a region, these are the things we'd like to make sure we uphold. So there's got to be an element of economic competitiveness. We've got to be increasing investment in our communities. Of course, that local input can't just be a kind of a regional only discussion where the local input gets kind of diluted. Regional service and access has got to be improved, and of course, those efficiencies have to be obtained. If we're not achieving these, then we're probably not on the right track. And the model, you remember probably a lot of reference to the jellyfish model in the past as we've given these presentations. That is what we are now referring to as a regional coordination model. I think some key takeaways here is the focus at this time and what this model does is above that dashed line, so the top of the jellyfish. Regional coordination. I'll give some examples in a minute of what those sorts of activities could be. At the same time, we've got providers, transit operators around the region, human services, fixed route, you name it, Going on, we're not trying to upset that apple cart or get in the way of what is already happening and going on well. Rather, we're looking to augment how they're coordinated together and what are those things that can really support the traveling public? What's their experience? Because as we know, those boundaries, those fare payments and other logistics are just can be an impediment. Let's make sure they're less so. So some of those functions, marketing and branding. So that's something where if we go in together and kind of have a shared message and sets of look and feel and understanding of this is what comes with the efforts that we're all putting together, that can be a gain for everyone. Transportation demand management, you've heard about this before, TDM. It's a fairly technical way of talking about really giving choices to folks that want to not necessarily use single occupancy vehicle to get around. So what are the programs, the technologies, other ways, the fan pool, it's some sort of app. What are the ways that I can achieve getting around a little bit more efficiently without using my vehicle all the time? Emerging technologies, making sure that as communities, as agencies are looking to convert or go to newer technologies, that they're doing this effectively and efficiently. Shared procurement, shared training, make sure everybody understands the new technologies, et cetera. Of course, some of the coordination, this is a big one. This is what's often from the transit agencies referred to as the low-hanging fruit. What are some of the things when you're in Concord or Kannapolis and you get on a rider bus and come to JW Play, you're now in the CAT system, maybe transferring to the Blue Line. What does that look like? Is that a pretty smooth experience, or are there a couple of different apps or purchases, et cetera? Got to pull up calendars and schedules. Like, how is that all working together? Maximizing funding. Real straightforward and obvious, but it's a lot harder to do. Making sure that those partnerships are being created so we can access those dollars. And then, of course, just regional planning. As we've talked about with Connect Beyond all along, everybody sees those big investments, the shiny, light rail and other big projects. It's about having those places where you go between modes. So from walking, biking, traveling in your car to a parking lot, to a transit vehicle, et cetera. What are all those points looking at? Committee work for 2024. This is I think really important and it's been I think a growth process for us all as we've had the conversation just about the layers as you peel this back that need to be discussed really to get to what we want that's going to work for our region. So instead of let's go get legislation, let's talk about the legislation in terms of eligible geography and these other things. So I'll share a little bit more about those. Who wants to even be in the area where this is possible? You don't have to act or do anything, but who wants to be eligible to be able to? Purpose and services provided, the kinds of services that this entity, this model that we're talking about, what would it provide? Let's understand what those are. And then, of course, the board composition and membership as something would roll out. What does that look like? Is a board of 60 people too much? Maybe so. Is a board of only 5 folks too little and not really representative? Probably is. So what does that look like and how is that defined and all the things that go with that? Funding. Now we get to funding. That's the thing that everybody kind of started with, but now we get there because we've got a situation that's going to work for the group. So this is the process and discussion we're having. As far as engagement, we know that throughout the year, it's going to be critical before anything happens. This first line, that regional coordination, local coordination, you just simply have to know what's going on, what this is about, what is in it for you, the WIFM, and just be sure that this is something that you understand clearly before you get questions from a state legislator or anyone else. You need to be comfortable with what we're talking about. But from there, how do we make the model our own? And this is really not a time where necessarily advancing the plan committee members or staff goes out and tells the region, this is what's gonna happen, but rather hears from the region, what are the concerns? What are the issues that need to be addressed before you're comfortable moving ahead? And then setting ourselves up for the future. So based on all those inputs, making sure that this is not a new thing that just hits people cold, but rather they're well aware of what's going on, then we can take things forward for the long session into really 2025. So those are the goals. They're pretty I'll say challenging, but we think we can keep on that track, keep moving on this, and we look forward to the conversations coming up. So with that in mind, I know you've got another important conversation with folks in aging tonight, so I don't want to take too long, but I did want to hear from you on a couple of things. So as we start working, with the committee, with the region's transportation planning organizations this spring, what are some of the key topics that we should be emphasizing? Is there anything from your experience that you better be pointing this out? It's gonna be good for you in the long term. It's gonna be helpful in the long term that folks are hearing a message, key piece of information.
This may be out of place, but I'm thinking what you said about connectivity between the Kannapolis bus to a Charlotte Blue Line. And I'm thinking of what I've heard recently, Mecklenburg County just put in a new software system for their building standards. And it's a colossal mess. And that's why I guess is you're going to implement many agencies under one, to me, that's gonna be critical that it's seamless.
Yeah, and you're bringing up a great point. As this model stands, we're saying, hey, each of the agencies remain autonomous. But when it comes to the individual who's trying to get from A to B, that's gonna be the seamless part, right? That they don't need to know about that, right? That's good. Great.
No, so as far as the RPOs are concerned is, what is their role and what they will be held accountable for if. That's gonna be key.
Or are they going to be asked for funding or some other action in the future?
I mean, how will they play into the overall, plan and the end result of what to be accomplished as far as, regional mobilization?
Right, good.
Anybody else?
Let's go to the second question really quick, if that's okay. Concerns or questions that, we're probably gonna get.
Funding.
How much I gotta pay? How much my taxes gonna go up, right?
Right? Taxes, how would you be raising those dollars? Anything else?
I think there may be some questions of representation, How's my little town gonna be represented when it comes to bigger towns like Concord and Estonia, and especially Charlotte, Are we gonna have fair representation? Are we gonna have a seat at the table?
Well, I don't want to stand in the way of the next agenda item, but thank you very much for your feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. All right, moving right along to item number 6, which is the fiscal year employee compensation proposal, which Geraldine Gardner's gonna go over. And I don't know if y'all are gonna be following suit with Gastonia and offering a $15,000 sign.
Well, I wish. Show me the money, Councilmember Step. Yes, that was very much in the news. In the region
Yes, I know, we
this
were gonna
past
call
week.
some national news.
Yes. So a short item, but a very important item for our team before you this evening. It's been our custom to bring before the board Around this time each year, our proposal for compensation increases for the central entity. There's information in your packet regarding some specific backgrounds. As we discussed last year, we look at our benchmarks to other councils of government across the state. We look at what they're offering, and we also think about our own compensation approach, which we've been moving towards a merit-based system. This year, we're proposing a 5% merit increase pool. Awards will be made based on performance evaluations using our TrackStar system, which is our performance evaluation system that we use here at Centralina. And those will be determined by supervisors and then reviewed at the HR and executive director level prior to being finalized. So one other quick important notes, in the budget that the executive board recommended for approval and the board of delegates approved in February was assumed a 5% pool. So the funds are already available. We wish we would have been able to do a little bit more. We were able to do 6% last year, but as all of you know, increases in the Elders local government retirement pool, as well as healthcare increase costs, we just weren't able to squeak out the additional percentage this year. Happy to answer any questions that anyone might have, but I'd appreciate a approval of this motion.
Questions?
This is Martha Sue. I would move approval.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passed. Moving right along. Moving on to item number 7, which is our in focus discussion on the aging program sustainability. So last on the agenda tonight is that, and I'm going to call on Geraldine to introduce the team.
Yeah, really appreciate Linda Miller, our aging director, and Katie Fitcher, our assistant director, coming before you this evening. We've added these in focus discussion topics to your executive board agendas this year, just to provide a space for a more in-depth conversation. This month, we're focusing on the sustainability and the financial sustainability of our aging programs. And before I turn it over to Linda, I just want to emphasize how important your kind of early eyes on and input into this evolving conversation. As we have to get more creative to find other tools to fund our core services, and Linda will go over those in a moment. We don't want to go down a road and bring before you a contract or an agreement for a type of service or a partner that isn't up to what the board is expecting. So there's going to be different moments during Linda's and Katie's presentation today. We're inviting some dialogue and discussion. Please take advantage of that. It's a lot of work for us to develop these business opportunities, and we want to make sure we're being responsive to the direction that the board sets. With that, I'll turn it over to Linda.
Thanks, Geraldine. They say as a speaker, you never want to be between lunch and your audience. Well, we're between you and home. So I think that's a much worse position, frankly. So we promise, that we will move this along as much as we can. Because we're passionate about what we do, we're always fascinated by aging issues. But we do want your input, and that's really important. And I'm going to have Geraldine keep us on track timing wise. And this was really a concerted effort on the PowerPoint. Geraldine gave us feedback at least 2-3 times and helped us tweak things. And Katie and I have looked it over multiple times. So. There it is. All right. So Federal Older Americans Act and state funds provide the necessary supports in our region to maintain an older adult their ability to live in their home in the community for as long as they would like, and that's possible. However, as a population, and we give you those data program sheets every year for your specific county and how your numbers change, the population of older adults in North Carolina increases, right? We're up to 9 as the 9th state with the most number of older adults over 60. Allocations to fund these services haven't kept pace with our older adult population. So that's a problem. And and I know you all do when you're in your communities. This thing does not like me, Geraldine. This was in your packet. When, Marissa sent everything out, it was very simple. We received that from the state, and it's something that shows that the Home and Community Care Block Grant, which is a combination of the Older Americans Act federal funds, about 45%. About 45% of the block grant funds are state allocations from your state legislature. And then 10% is always the local match, which shows that when adjusted for inflation, we're actually losing dollars. And at the state population over 60 has grown at a dramatic rate, but our appropriations have actually increased by 10%. And I think it's a pretty dramatic, graphic. This was provided to each one of you in the state has 2 senior Tar Heel legislatures that go 3 times a year to Raleigh and advocate for older adult issues. And this was developed by the state team that supports them.
So our population over 60 in North Carolina has grown by over 80%.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. And
Now in our region, there you go. I hope you can see the numbers are a little small. In our region specifically, the state has worked this data up for us, and that's by county. Overall, our region saw about a 14% average increase, and we timed the 20 to 24 period, 5-year period. And that's 60 and up. And you can see Anson counties have very, very slow growth, up to Union County being our top with almost a 23% increase. Isn't that amazing? So I'll leave for just a minute. Any questions on that? It's pretty dramatic. All right, so just to show, there's the block grant funding is the red line. That's the combination of state, federal, and local funds. And that's the trend. Now that's fairly flat. Yes, over the 5-year period, we've received about $1.5 million or so, almost an increase. But you can see that the programs and administration funds meant to manage that money and more programs layered on top of that is incredibly flat. And still not clearly enough to meet the needs of the older adults. All right, so Katie, you're gonna have to jump in when this was not yours, right?
No.
I was trying to mix Katie in so you'd get 2 faces. So that flat funding has a variety of different impacts. We've begun, because remember, ARPA's at the tail end. We're in the 23rd hour for the ARPA funding, even for the aging. So that's beginning. And of course, really the big services like nutrition and so forth, they went through their money right away. So wait lists are beginning. That's something we hadn't seen for about 1.5 years or 2 years. So the last time we checked, we were back up cumulative between the 9 counties about back up to services. This is all the services lumped together. We're back up to almost 3,000 people waiting for services again. And that would be things like transportation, in-home aid, nutrition, meals, home delivered, but it's back up. And we're seeing some are actually refusing now to take anybody else on the wait list because it gets too long and it gets hard to maintain. Underserved clients. What I mean by this is that you may have an older adult who, because funds are restricted, who really has been assessed and may need an in-home aide to come in 3 times a week to help them with personal care, bathing and dressing, but because they may be underserved because we can't give them that much service. They're only going to get 1 day or 2 days a week. So we call that an underserved client because there's just not enough money to give them really what they need. Lack of staffing or staff stability, which is a high turnover, but you all have heard, I'm sure, in the medical and healthcare field, what staffing is like. And David could probably talk on that for, 30 minutes on direct care workers and where we are in that field. And that's just been a real problem, getting service to older adults. Lack of innovation and creativity to meet these new and growing needs. Now, I know that what we're starting to see also is we're serving 3 generations of older adults, the 60 and 70-year-old and the 80 and 90. And their needs are very different. A meal, I'm trying to think of my brothers are all older. early 70s. Well, they don't eat, the mashed potatoes, green beans, and the chicken with gravy. They would never think of that for a midday meal. So that, yeah, you're seeing a big discrepancy, and we're serving a very varied group of older adults. So we need more innovation and creativity that we're allowed with some of the ARPA, the funding that we receive for ARPA, and that isn't allowed in more traditional Older Americans Act and state funds. So we really like that to be more innovative and potentially probably much more efficient is what we think. There's poor sustainability sometimes for proven programs. You've all seen this. You get those grants and then you did a great job, but in 3 years, no more grants. What do you do? And then, of course, long-term care is very expensive. We're going to look at that in a minute, but it's sometimes the only option left to an older adult and their family is to place their loved one.
Okay, this
All
is
right,
cool.
and there it is.
Okay, so speaking of how expensive long-term care is, this is just kind of a snapshot to really show that home and community-based services are also a good investment. It's a good use of funding. So not only is it where people want to age, they want to age in place in their communities, they want to be able to have their needs met at home, but it also saves money. So if you look at the left side here, this is just looking at the average annual Medicaid reimbursement for individuals who would be residing in skilled nursing care. And so as you compare that to what we're looking at on the right-hand side, this would be for an individual receiving a number of home and community-based services to have the supports they need to age in place in the community. So they could be supported through the home delivered meal program. They could be receiving transportation services to get to and from where they need to go. Could be medical appointments. It could be the nutrition program. Also getting those in-home aid services. Linda was mentioning that earlier. And you can see there's really a dramatic cost savings. So again, with just some of that community-based support, individuals would be able to age in place longer. And so that's really the goal. That's the intention. That's the purpose of these aging services, is to support older adults and support caregivers so that they can prevent altogether or delay placement in long-term care.
Now, Medicaid is not Medicare. If you're in Medicare in a long-term care facility for rehab because you had a knee replacement or a hip replacement, that's different. You get 20 days at no cost to you. Those people cycle in and out of a long-term care facility. These are people who were there because they have no alternatives left. They have no assets left. They have no home left. And now when you go in on Medicaid, they do a complete assessment of all your assets, your home, certain things. And then the state Medicaid pays for you to be in a long-term care. I can keep 10 people at home for what one person is in Medicaid. And about what, Katie, how many people?
60 to 70%.
Yeah, we had our ombudsman pull the latest data, and it was about 65–70% of people in nursing homes in North Carolina are paid for by Medicaid.
So what are the issues? Well, a few have bubbled up already, right? You're already seeing the picture as you're looking at the data, you're looking at the graphs. So of course, we're very interested in how can we sustain or increase funding. So again, sustaining funding, we have been really fortunate to have ARPA funding to help us to meet the needs and meet the demands among the region. But we know we're going to have to get creative when those funding sources go away here in September. But also, how can we increase funding? So even with that, we're seeing that the funding does not meet the level of demand. You saw those numbers of older adults going up and up. And so we want to be creative. We also want to diversify funding. So how can we be less reliant on the government funding? So it has been a tried and true source of funding, and the Older Americans Act, we're looking forward to its reauthorization, but we do want to explore other opportunities to help meet the needs of older adults and caregivers. And also, again, and Linda mentioned this, really looking to maintain creativity and innovation that we were able to begin to implement during ARPA. And we know there's things that we haven't even tried yet that would be really beneficial for the region. So how can we continue to meet the needs and the demands of older adults in our region, and recognizing that those needs and wants are changing, just as Linda had mentioned. And then, of course, also, we want to be able to deliver the services effectively and efficiently. And so this kind of speaks to some of those innovations that were able to be developed during ARPA. So with the flexibility that Linda talked about, we were able to try new services that had not been traditionally provided and are not traditionally allowed under the Older Americans Act or the Home and Community Care Block Grant. So things like grab and go meals, which this was wildly successful and very popular. And it allowed older adults to pick up the meals and then eat them at home rather than coming to a congregate nutrition site. So of course, we're hearing great feedback from the individuals that they like that model, prefer that model. We also know there's some cost savings there in delivering the service in that way. Also, having some more freedom with the dietary guidelines. So there is a very strict meal pattern, strict guidelines under the Home and Community Care Block Grant, but having some flexibility also allows for some innovation as well. Other things that we saw, so not just in nutrition, would even be for transportation. So having the flexibility for transportation vouchers to supplement the existing transportation options, help fill in some gaps in areas, has been something that has been working really well in some areas with ARPA. And so we would love to see that continue. So ultimately, that flexibility has been proven to be effective, and we want to be sure we can keep doing those things. I think the few other examples there, one is talking about respite care vouchers. So providing a much needed break for family caregivers who are providing care for loved ones was something that we've been able to do through ARPA funding. And then also to implement some new direct services that Centralina had not done before, such as home improvement services. And I know when we did the focus group, I think a few meetings ago, we heard that that is very much a need for individuals to maintain their homes safely. And so there's an increasing demand for that program. We've been able to implement it through ARPA and would love to see that continue. So that's kind of some of the successes through ARPA, but we've also found innovations through other grant funding. And so one of our newer programs, it's called the PEARLS program, and that stands for the Program to Encourage Active and Rewarding Lives for Older Adults. And it's a program designed for older adults experiencing depression. So of course, we know that loneliness and isolation is something that certainly has been an issue for a number of years. We saw it increase during the pandemic. And so these kinds of programs to support older adults, to help them to reduce the symptoms of depression, to help them to find meaningful connections in the community are really powerful. And other grant and funded programs would be programs that have allowed us to do some fall intervention work. So looking at falls, the kind of safety assessments in the home, and then even looking at some simple home modifications that can help keep people home safe longer. Again, preventing or delaying placement in long-term care. And even grants have supported things like our regional transportation guide, getting out there and doing education about what transportation options are out there already, what exists through fixed route or demand response. And we've had really positive feedback from older adults, also from aging service providers, social workers who are able to use those resources.
So far we've talked a lot, but is there anything, a few of you, I see a lot of nods and so forth, anything that you've noticed or any changes in services to older adults in your counties, your towns?
Jennifer T. One thing that we've noticed, particularly we're in the midst of a tax reevaluation. So we have a lot of our older community coming and trying to figure out ways to help with that. And it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of movement on the income qualifications at the state level for this. So, you know, $30,000 8-10 years ago looks a heck of a lot different right now. And so to be able to get some relief, they're not qualifying for it because that bar has not moved at all. And so I would like to see if there's something that collectively we could do at the state level to help move that, particularly during this high inflationary period. I think there's plenty of people that would take advantage of some of that service if they could, just some relief for this moment, but they can't because of the income qualification. That it's the same.
And we
And I
just
think
went through this last year and we had the same issue. You know, I would tell them there is this, but then I'm minute, I'm already
Well,
minority.
before we would see, it was a pride issue. They didn't want to come in and ask for it, and now they're coming in droves, and we just simply aren't able to help them because of that income piece. And I mean, $35,000 is, Gosh.
Yeah, it's.
some of those medications cost that. So when you're looking to try
And
to
I
get.
think that came through strong in some of the focus groups.
Yes, we talked about that.
Very strong. That and home repair.
It seems like one of our neighboring states raised theirs to like $100,000 last couple of years.
Yeah.
Somewhere up in that area.
Mayor, that might be a good legislative item to add to our Raleigh relations list.
I think so. We're hearing enough of it now that we're trying some things on our end to see what we can do to engage our state leaders on that. It's just added to the list of all the things that we need to be working on.
Right. For the first time, we feel like we might be able to get some flexible money. It's actually ARPA money again, but it's ARPA somehow the state can't spend. And one of the things that they've never allowed us to do ever in my 28 years was help people with sort of financial relief for things that inadvertently might either make them at risk for homelessness or they lose their house. One of which might be pay past utility bills, pay past taxes, those types of things. That has been unheard of. So it's only going to be a 1.5 to 2-year program, but I think they hear some of that. And I think if we continue that, there has to be relief.
I mean, I can give them just case studies on how well it works to be able to keep them in our community. I mean, they could sell their home for $1 gazillion in our market right now, but then where are they gonna go? And
Yes.
they've got this community of support around them, neighbors that check in on them daily or might bring them some meals, but it's not enough.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. So similarly with that, any other concerns like that about any changes?
Yes, excuse me. This
Oh,
is
I'm
Patty,
sorry.
Commissioner, from Stanley. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I would say, what I do in my full-time working position is I'm a home health, marketing representative. And so I call on all of the different, doctor's offices, the skilled nursing facilities, assisted livings, the hospital in Stanley County and some in Cabarrus. And, one of the things that we have seen an increase in over the last year to 2 years is, it's called PDGM diagnoses. And what that boils down to is getting a diagnosis that is going to make insurance companies happy, and not decline the referral for home health services. And with those home health services, you're getting the falls prevention, you're getting the therapy in the home, you're getting the home health aide that can provide the bathing during the week. Insurance does pay for all of that if you can get the diagnosis right. We can even open Medicaid patients sometimes, as well, to give all of these same services if you can get the diagnosis right. But the hard part is all these years, forever and ever. I mean, you could write an order for physical therapy and occupational therapy for an older adult based on repeated falls or dizziness or vertigo, and you can't do that now. They will say, well, repeated falls, why? Or dizziness, why? And so then it's forcing the doctor's hand to now put the dizziness onto another diagnosis. You got to say the falls are because of peripheral neuropathy, and then you can only do that if they've got diabetes. And so doctors will, who have traditionally written for this, are now sort of getting their hands slapped, and patients are getting declined left and right. And so it's really hard because then doctors just throw their hands up and they're like, well, I'm not even going to fool with that, because all I do is I get this rep that comes back in and says, you got to change your note. Can you write an addendum? And they don't have time for that. They have people coming in every 15 minutes so that is one of our biggest pain points, is trying to get that language right, to get it accepted.
And Medicare's such a slow moving machine, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Anything else? And then we'll move along. It just jumps out. Thank you for your comments. All right, so What we've sort of put together is what we just call sort of a multifaceted approach to try to have more financial stability, sustainability, and potentially increase funding. That diversification and not just be reliant on those federal and state funds is something that the AAAs across the entire nation are looking at right now. So we're very much in that wave. And these build and increase on complexity and potentially the reward or the amount of funding you might get. Simple things that I'm sure you all look at, in your communities, is things like bulk purchasing. How can we gather this group together so that we're buying more for our money and getting value? And I'll go through each one. Grants, fee for service types of things that we might be able to do, contracts, of course. Here's where we get real complex, Medicare and Medicaid. And then I'll talk to you, we had stuck an article about what a community care hub is. And some of you may have heard of some of that model, particularly in healthcare. And we'll wrap up with that. So bulk purchase, Katie, I think.
Sure.
Is it me or you?
I think you wanted me to
Okay,
talk
I'll
about
do
nutrition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Increasing, and again, we talked about increasing that buying power. We really want to be good stewards. Why should I pay more for something if we can get it much cheaper and we can serve more people that way and be more efficient? The Family Caregiver Support Program does this using a company called PMF, in which we buy everything in bulk. For some of our counties don't participate because they have to purchase through what their DSS might mandate. But for the opportunity, this would be particularly for things. These aren't things covered by your Medicare. These are things like incontinence supplies, supplemental nutrition supplies. Those are things that are extremely expensive if you talk to a caregiver for things like Ensure or Boost, and then incontinence supplies. Outrageously expensive. So the program can pay for those, but we want to buy as many as we can. We also looked at a regional nutrition contract in which we're still doing some assessment evaluation of that. Katie, what is that for everybody?
Just to say, so we have senior nutrition programs in all 9 counties. There's actually 11 different senior nutrition providers, because depending on the county, sometimes one provides home delivered meals, one provides congregate. And when you think of that with our current system, they're all procuring their own contracts in terms of caterers to provide those meals. We only have one provider who actually has their own kitchen and prepares their own meals. Everyone else is contracting. So we're doing a feasibility study to see, hey, would there be any cost savings if we went in together for meals, or even for types of meals, like for those who provide frozen or shelf-stable meals. So we're in the process of evaluating that and looking at options.
We do also buy some other supplies in bulk and distribute them to the region, figuring we then are able to take advantage of that. There are mandated books for all of our health and wellness classes on diabetes, falls prevention, so forth. We print them here and distribute them to the region. And then, of course, we have some sort of purchases, such as we purchase for the region, and actually True-Alta, the state, is paying for the last year of True-Alta. That's a software for caregivers that educates them about situations as a caregiver. I don't know much about, I've never had to bathe a loved one, and how do I do that? And there'll be all sorts of resources there for them to learn things. How do I learn about difficult behaviors, or if they're acting out, or if they're potentially violent? So that is available to all of our 9 counties and all of our caregivers. And then there's another program called Get Set Up that is live 24/7 classes for older adults. And we pay for it for all 9 counties. There's a code that you pop in so that, it won't work out of our 9 counties. It's just for us. But that's 24/7. And it's classes on technology and finance. Like, I don't know how to use my iPhone. How do I get a good picture? How do I set up my iPad? How do I use a Kindle? All the way to how to cooking classes or travel classes. Exercise. How do I get Lyft and Uber? And so it's there, it's available. We've done a program for the board or stuck that in there, but it might be time to refresh everybody's memory. Fee for service. We have had people in the past, this would be a hospital system or other people who say, we want to pay you to do the Matter of Balance workshop for our clients. not very frequent, less frequent than we'd like, to pay classes and, training. Right now, we got contacted by, Bank of America paying, AAAs across the country. Actually, it's their little mini grants, but they want to train you to go into the senior centers to train older adults with a curriculum that they designed on managing money. Budget, how do I budget? How do I make ends meet at the end of the month? They designed it, but they're paying people to go in and do it. So fee for service training, and of course, supportive services. We've gotten contacted before for family caregiver by some of the bigger companies who said, we want you to support our clients that are in our healthcare system, and we'll pay for them for support groups, for you to run those for our clients, but fee for service. Make sure we get them all in. Grants.
We'll be quick. These are just a few examples of grants. Again, so looking for outside funding to support the work that we do here. So through the Charlotte UZA has supported transportation efforts, partnerships with UNC Asheville has what's called the Center for Health and Wellness. That's helped to support some of our evidence-based programming. And so this does help to sustain staff and support existing work and grow more innovative programs.
But we try to look for a good fit. I know a lot of you do this. We call it grading funding. So that if we have a couple of grants that are doing very similar things, we can braid that and sustain staff or sustain our efforts. So we don't want to do anything way out in left field. We want to try to make things fit really well with what our staff's doing now. All right, contracts. This is where it starts to get a little bit more tricky. The healthcare system is really looking and being held accountable to do now or purchase from community-based organizations such as area agencies on aging for what they call social determinants of health. Do you know what a social determinant of health is? It is transportation, nutrition. Last time I checked, you would think nutrition would be medical because housing is considered a social determinant of health, housing repair, health and wellness, anything. They don't want to provide it. They want the community-based organizations. And this is the buzzword, and this is what they want. Even Medicare wants to see more of these social determinants of health provided by a community-based organization, a network of them. Providers that we're in contact with would be things, WellCare, which is owned by Centene, United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Humana is also one. These are people providing Medicare, Medicare Advantage, or healthcare to their to the people that they provide to. Hospital systems and physicians' practices also. And vets directed home and community-based services is also, it was tried about 5 years ago. It all went very badly across the state. They're picking it back up. We just heard Raleigh's gonna now have 20 to 25 people. And this is when the veteran, our local, which would be Salisbury in our region, says these people want to stay in their home. They've been assessed. We think they can be supported in the home by a strong family network system. And we budget them for what we think they need. Well, that money stays with them. It's person-centered, person-directed, and you help them coordinate all the services, and they stay in their home rather than placed in the long-term care systems, and the veterans system pays for them in a nursing home. So supposedly the feds have said this should be on fast track. So given that we have Salisbury, the VA in our region, we feel very positively that that should be something that would be coming online. That these would be contract-based, where we're not dependent on grants, we're dependent on fee for service.
I just want to interject real quick on this one. So like the veterans directed home, this is an example of a contract that will come to you guys.
Thank you.
Right, so this is where, if there's any concerns about us providing these services, these are the touch points that we need to know when we get to the discussion questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's great to have your your input all the way, but this is where it would start to be really crucial. What do you think about this? What are we missing? What sort of suggestions? And that would be any contracts that come before you. And of course, we're already certified as a Medicare entity. We would like to expand Medicare services and reimbursement opportunities. It's just not easy. It is just not easy at all. We are certified for diabetes education and nutrition therapy, which is a one-on-one service with an RD. We can provide that. That's all we're licensed for, and provide that. It's some of the same issue that we were discussing before. We can't get doctors to fill out the paperwork to say this person needs diabetes education. And they're entitled to a lifetime benefit of 12 hours of diabetes education. We estimate the last data we looked at was only 75% of the people diagnosed with diabetes access that benefit. So where are they? And how can we get at them? There are new codes through the Centers for Medicare Services on social isolation. What can we provide through there and get reimbursed for? And chronic disease self-management and support. We're checking into that. That is brand new. And then, of course, we're excited because dual eligibles, those people that are eligible for Medicare and Medicaid, should be coming on board this year. And they're looking to AAAs, to what services that you can provide. Do have to keep in mind, which we would also bring before the board, Medicaid, if we got into contracts with Medicaid, you cannot pick and choose. They provide services to all ages. All right, so I'm almost done. Last slide. Promise. Community care hubs. These are community-based organizations, as are other agencies, are community-based organizations, just like we are. That would be maybe your Meals on Wheels, Cabarrus Meals on Wheels, Rowan Meals on Wheels, the DSSs. They're community-based organizations. A hub would get these community-based organizations working together, one centralized system, and we would provide services to a multi-county or potentially statewide area. They can be more efficient, serve a wider area more seamlessly, very attractive to contractors such as health care organizations who then only deal with the hub, not these 16 AAAs. Administrative functions and operational infrastructure then are centralized at the hub. North Carolina is slowly, cautiously exploring, I'll leave that to Geraldine, this model through the North Carolina Association of the Regional Councils, and services provided through the AAA. As I said, those social determinants of health are really the most in demand right now. As these community care hub models gain momentum, AAA staff want to keep you updated and provide more information. It's very complex sort of thing, but they're popping up everywhere, and they primarily start with the AAAs and AAAs that are housed under regional planning organizations. I know it's a lot. What are your concerns about anything we might have raised, or especially about those more complex types of things we might getting into, like contracts or being part of a hub or Medicaid or Medicare reimbursement? We have received Medicare reimbursement over the last few years, probably no more than a few $1,000s a year. Teaching a couple of classes. Again, the breakdown is at the physician referral point.
So any major concerns about us pursuing these various options? And I think the follow-on question would be, as Linda and her team are looking at these business opportunities, when in that process would you, something new like Medicaid serving everyone, or community care hubs, which is a very complex business model, risk associated with that, when would the board like to engage in those issues, assuming that putting a contract for you on the consent agenda may not be the right approach? So just like some help on that would be very helpful at this stage.
These are big things coming that we should probably be pretty active in those discussions, even if it's just, this is where we're at, this is what we're looking at, this is what's coming to us. I think it's great. I mean, if this is a way for us to get some more centralized money where you know where it needs to be spent versus cutting through all the red tape to get some of it, I think it's a great avenue. Are you guys sure y'all want to do that? Because that's a big, it's a lot. It is a lot.
I think, Sean Rush, me, Spencer, I would love to see that food model. For instance, in Rowan, we have an organization to where the singers have to come. And then our other organization, the one I'm a part of, we deliver it out through volunteers. And so there's been what we call a under the table war between food.
Food war, huh?
The food war.
Yeah, we're aware.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, those are two different models, though, for a
Mhm.
more frail, homebound older adult that would not be able to come to what we call a congregate site, where part of that is what we call more than a meal, where they're getting a little bit of socialization, maybe an exercises, rolled in there with someone. So they're very different model, and that's a more active older adult who might drive to that congregate site and spend 2-3 hours for like a mini senior center and get the meal and go. So they are very different models. But yes.
I think Martha Sue has her hand.
Okay.
I just love it because I was able to maneuver my screen to raise my hand. Now if I can. I think back to 1994. God, that seems like yesterday. But when I first ran for county commissioner, and the thoughts and the issues that were before us as a county and us as a region then, as it dealt with AAA services. And when I saw that very first slide about the increase, about the graying of our community, it just goes side by side, Geraldine, of when you came here 5 or 6 years ago and what the anticipated population growth was going to be by 2030 and now 2040. So, I mean, it goes to reason that we would have these opportunities. I think the main question that I heard a minute ago was, so what are your concerns? Do you just want it on a consent agenda? Y'all know how I hate consent agendas. And I will tell you, a lot of folks use consent agendas to slide things under the table, to slide things under the rug. I won't say that we do that, okay? But I don't like consent agendas when it needs to be something that folks need to take responsibility for. Now, with all that garbage said, the question was, what do we want? I personally would love to see it I don't want a contract to come on a consent agenda, particularly because it looks like to me we're going to have a hot load of money. And again, just for my friends around that table and on this call that are elected, that's how Centralina makes its money and is able to, our membership fees don't pay things. So we got to take in that money and be able to use it. But I would love to have any of these big money contracts not put on a consent agenda. Just so that if there are issues that folks need to ask about or are concerned about, that would be my only. I'm thrilled that we've got this opportunity. Okay, thrilled, because we need it now more than ever.
Geraldine, I think if there's an example of something that you think might kind of fit into this, I think the only one that I remember seeing since I've been on executive board was around COVID and in-home, and there was some language that was in there that I don't know sat well with. It almost was like we were going to be the medical professionals deciding what was happening.
Yeah.
And so there was some trepidation from this executive board on that. But what are we looking at?
I mean, probably the first one that will be coming would be the veterans one, right?
Yeah, that might take a while, but yeah, veterans directed would be a good example though. That would be somebody, contracting with us to say, we want you to do, typically they do the assessment and say, this is what they've been approved for. They've been approved even for budgets. We don't have to do any of that. We would then help that older adult or his caregiver, his or her caregiver, manage that. Because there's a lot of complexities with it as far, because it's like cash every month. You don't lose it. It would roll over to the pot. And they're supposed to keep a rainy day fund. They can buy supplies from it. They can hire somebody to come in and help them. They can hire a neighbor. Hey, I can pay the next door neighbor to come and sit with my husband while I go out. So there's, but they would need somebody to negotiate potentially sometimes, or navigate that and help track along the way, and to be there to provide technical assistance and support throughout the month. So almost like mini case management, but also helping them. That would be a good example. You're right. We're not the nurse to do the assessment. We're not gonna even, but we're that connector. I think that's a good way. We're that connector or that bridge between what their medical care has said they need, or they're recommending, or Medicare, to the community to get the services. Maybe they want meals. Well, maybe then I call Rowan Meals on Wheels to say, they're willing to pay for the meal. So we get everybody, what's it saying about it? The tide floats the boat. It could potentially lift up everybody. Wouldn't some of our providers love to get some private pay to pay for meals, Meals on Wheels, Rowan Meals on Wheels?
I think
Those types of things.
in addition to the programmatic, there are a couple of other layers. There's the risk, there's the financial management, there's the legal. So there's some systems that all of this programmatic work intersects with that are going to be more complex. And so I might suggest, if anyone is particularly interested in this, maybe there's like a small group of you that we can work with. So that when we do bring forward contracts to the board, that maybe some of those issues have been vetted with the officers and some of the other folks that have more of a programmatic interest. Because again, like the community care hub piece of it, if we get into this business as a state association of 16 councils of government, wow, what a great business opportunity, but that's a lot of risk. That is a huge decision, and we need to be bringing you all along the way. And I just need to know who among you is interested in having that conversation so that we can work with Linda. So that might be something that I would ask just for folks to think about, and maybe get in touch with Narissa or myself, and we can have some smaller group conversations if that's something that would be beneficial from your perspective.
I'm thinking I need somebody to help me out. What keeps coming to mind? I mean, it's what I'm hearing is truly the opportunity. It's not anything that's like what's going on with the LMEs and MCOs and all that kind of thing. It's just totally different from that, right? It's something that we can, I guess, elect to do rather than being told. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
no, this would be purely, exactly. That's absolutely, that's a really good point. And I should make that clarification. It is purely elective. But the trend is that most AAAs across the country, whether they're under regional planning organizations or not, realize that survival won't be just your grant funds from the federal government, that they're looking for ways to diversify so you're not that dependent. And I'm going to leave you with this thought, because I've talked enough. You're going to say, never invite her to talk again. Someone's going to do it. Someone will do it. If not us, then who would do it better than us? And I would argue that no one would do it better than us. I said when I started this job, no one wanted to touch or be a AAA. Now everybody wants to be a AAA. So that's all. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to the slide that showed the $102,000? I'm trying to understand, is that a monthly or annual?
Annual. That's annual. The monthly was
Way over 13.
the cost. Yeah, that's what, and that's average. It's
every nursing home gets a different rate. So that's an average. Monthly would be about 9,000 a month. And every state and every nursing home gets a different rate. So that wouldn't look like that in California. It'd probably be twice that. And this is an average of, well, if somebody got 5 meals delivered every week, 2 trips of transportation every week, and an in-home aid 3 times a week for a visit would be about $1,100. And that would be that a year. So meals average in our region, $5 to $9 or $10, depending. Some are more expensive. Average trip for transportation is about 20 one way, so 40, 45. And in home aid averages about 19 to 23 an hour. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you. That's right. Always like to hear from Linda, Katie, and Debbie, when y'all speaking, because it's so important what y'all are doing.
Thank you.
All right, well, moving right along, we're now down to the closing comments, but is there any comments from the executive board, executive director and the Centralina staff?
I've got one quick thing.
Okay.
You all might remember back in 2019, we had Brad Panovich, show up to us about the radar gap. This is a little graphic that you might remember from that presentation. The kind of donut hole in the middle of this is parts of our region that weren't covered by a National Weather Service radar. So making our ability and our emergency managers' ability to predict tornadoes and other severe weather events very restricted. The blue was like fair to okay, and the green was coverage. That was surfaced as a concern. It's been something that we, myself and a couple of other COG directors have been working on. And the great news is that there has been a private sector solution that has solved our radar gap issues. Organization called ClimaVision has installed 3 radars in our region, in the Piedmont Triad region, in Lumber River, one in Denver, High Point, and Scotland County. Those are the yellow dots that you see here. So our radar gap has been addressed. They are still working through some issues with the National Weather Service to ensure that the data that these radars produce will be accepted for forecasting purposes. But the National Weather Service guru, I don't know what his official title is, the big guy, was apparently in Asheville last month and told people attending at a conference that the future of our national radar service is a public-private partnership because of the age of our infrastructure. And so that's a very good sign that this data will be accepted. So just a little bright spot of progress for our region and our emergency preparedness that I wanted to share.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Such good news. We've
Really good
been
news.
asking about it for a while now. So that's great. All right. So next comes to my comments. So on April 25th, from 10 to 12, there'll be a Centralina Learn session on aging sensitivity and age-friendly communities. On May 7th, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., Centralina's series on grant writing and capacity building continues with a session on how to tell your smart story in grant application. Our next executive board meeting will be held until June 12th, held here at the Centralina office. However, the next time we meet will be on May 8th, when we convene the next Board of Delegates meeting. This meeting will be a special one as Centralina Regional Council opens its doors for the annual open house. And each department will have representatives on location to talk about the current initiatives and the ways our towns can benefit from their services. We will also have a focused discussion on housing. A quorum is essential for this meeting, so please be on the lookout for the meeting information and reminders from the resident. And as we have reached the end of our agenda, there being no further business to come before the board, I declare the meeting adjourned.